こんにちは。君がドクターだよね。よかった。チェンさんが言ってた通り、一目で分かったよ。そうだ。俺もコードネームを決めた方がいいよね。テキーラってのはどう？悪くないでしょ？
Hello and welcome back to another appointment, doctors. Today we are going to talk on one of, if not the strongest welfare operator we have as of now, and that is Tequila, a 5-star Liberator guard. Until the next patch, Tequila is the only Liberator guard, being Milna will be the 2nd and the 6-star alternative of this archetype. Being a welfare operator, this means he can be obtained during the Docilis holiday event or when his record is finally available. If you happen to have Tequila and want a quick answer, I highly recommend building him, although if you don't have him yet, then you can wait until Milna's release. I probably won't be making his guide, but I will make Prophyce's guide instead. Despite Tequila's very low base attack for a guard, he will continuously increase his attack when his skill is not active, making him deal very high damage once his skill is activated, depending when you activate his skill. It's also worth noting that Tequila's playstyle is not for those who are impatient, but the wait is still worth the cost because the amount of damage that he will deliver. It's also worth noting that Tequila's archetype has very high defensive stats, making them the tankiest guard archetype we have right now. Because of this, you don't have to be worried when his skill is not active yet. Before we get to Tequila's talent, I would like to mention Tequila's trait first. Tequila won't attack nor block when his skill is not active, however his attack stats will gradually increase over the course of 40 seconds or 20 seconds with 2 times speed, and this effect will reset once his skill duration ends. Tequila can increase his attack up to 200%, which translates to 5% attack increase every second. In Tequila's case, you will see his sword glows red to indicate that he finally gained the full potential of his attack stats. This is quite important to take note to since Tequila's playstyle is quite centered on waiting, so generally it is best for you to wait for 40 seconds before using his skill. Another important point, Tequila's final attack is not his base attack but multiplied by 200%, which means his base attack is still the same before he gained the stacks and does not synergize well with multiplier attack buffs like Warfarin. Instead, he synergized better with additive buffs such as from Bard supporters, preferably Skadi's 3rd skill, and attack speed buff like Arc, although it still depends on the situation and I'll elaborate more on that in the discussion section. But if you want to know more about buffs and debuffs, then watch this video for more info. Tequila's talent allows him to deal 23% of Tequila's attack to arts damage when he got attacked by enemies and when his skill is not activated. The talent by itself is not amazing, even at his peak attack stat from his trait. Very straightforward and there isn't much to say other than it gives cheap damage to your enemies during Tequila's passive state. So far by the time this video is made, Tequila's module is not available yet, but I'll update that in the pinned comment once it is available. This skill by itself is not terrible since the additional 50 points of attack speed is pretty large. In fact, it's the same amount that you get when you're using Arc's 3rd skill. It is worth noting that this skill's peak performance is at 40 second count, so even with his low skill point cost, this skill is best used with additional 20 seconds before the activation. Even though this skill can be set better than his 2nd skill for a single target assuming you wait for another 20 seconds, you still more than likely never use this skill anyway, even for that purpose to shorter skill duration and smaller attack range. This skill is not worth the investment, but let's see how it performs. This skill is easily Tequila's bread and butter, making him famous for being Light Silver Ash. Even though you can activate this skill early, it is always better to use it until he reaches charge mode unless you are in dire situation. His charge mode is equal to 40 seconds, which means you already have his attack stats at maximum potential assuming you don't use SP batteries. You can also gain additional effects from this skill, being that the duration is doubled and he can attack one more enemy, and you can also deactivate this skill whenever you want, so if Tequila is done clearing down his enemies, you can deactivate his skill and let him charge his attack once again, again until the next activation. Also don't forget, Tequila can't attack aerial enemies. With that being said, let's take a look on the performance.
我が足元が神に祝福されし大地に
仰せの
私がお守りし
仰せのまあまあ落ち着いてちゃんと話そう仰せの嘘手助けの嘘手助け仰せの嘘ちゃんと話そう
山々となり
嘘だ仰せのまま仰せのまま嘘だ
勝利の歌あるにはあるけど今歌うわけにはいかないわ真の勝利はまだずっと遠くにあるそうでしょ
Tequila, in my opinion, is the best 5-star welfare and the best 5-star guard we have right now, hands down. Of course, it is my biased opinion since you can argue that Sin or Ami are the best welfare, while Spectre or Lapan are the best 5-star guard, but again, it is undeniable that he is extremely strong for what he can offer as a 5-star, and he is a good boy, at least in my opinion. You probably have seen a lot of 5-star only clears with Tequila more than likely appear on those videos, and that is because of how good his damage is. The fact that he is known to be a miniature version of Sivras says quite a lot. His multi-target attack with explosive damage is what makes him valuable. You can even use him as a boss killer, and you can see that when I show you his second skill capability earlier. Of course you need supports to do that, but even then it is still very practical to do so. In my own experience using him and small comparison with Tequila versus Sivras here, Tequila is more comfortable to use since he has shorter skill point cost, easier to use, and doesn't reduce his defensive capabilities when damaging his enemies. Against enemies with higher defense, Tequila is surprisingly outperforms Sivras. You can see from this clip that Tequila is able to defeat Patriot while Sivras is still left with plenty of HP. Mind you, both of them have the same support, but Hayat's shining on Sivras so he can survive. But again, Sivras has different value where he has larger and wider range, which allows him to defeat way more guerrilla defenders than Tequila, and he also has reduced redeployment for your whole team, so he has different values when we compare them together, and it still depends on the situation. I do have to admit Sivras's value drops a lot now that more and more broken operators are released, especially that we will have Milnar in the next patch, so I am hoping that his module will save him. If you ask me on his clearing issue, then it's waiting. If you're impatient, then you might find Tequila's playstyle to be underwhelming since he needs 40 seconds to give his best performance, or basically 40 skill point cost without any other skill point batteries or skill point conditions. Speaking of skill point batteries, this is also means that Tequila's synergy is quite linear in terms of buffs and utility. Using skill point batteries like Tilopsis or Liscom can reduce his damage potential, assuming you want to use his skill immediately when it's ready. Even if you have his second skill at early full charge, Tequila won't give the best performance possible because of his low attack upgrade from his trait. Assuming you have Telopsis level 3 module activated and you want to immediately use Tequila skill when it's ready, you gain 26 stacks from his trait, which also translated to 130% attack upgrade. This means you lose 70% of Tequila's attack, which is quite a pity since 70% is still a lot of damage. Of course, it still depends on your strategy, and 26 attack upgrade is a respectable number, but generally speaking, you probably won't get that much of a difference, if not worse difference if you're using skill point batteries anyway. And again, if you need skill point batteries to support your whole team, then you might want to stick with that than not using skill point batteries for worse overall team performance. Like I also mentioned when I explained his trait, using Warframe or anyone else that can buff his attack by multiplicatively won't benefit Tequila that much because of his low base attack stat. But it's worth noting that Arc is still a good synergy with Tequila, not because of his attack multiplier, but the attack speed addition. To put it simply, more attack speed is still equal to more DPS even if your enemy has high armor, but again it still depends on who you are facing. Anyway, since Tequila has very little synergy with multiplier attack buffs, this means you are down to either Skadi, Heidi or Sora, which even then both Sora and Heidi can be awkward to use while Skadi is limited. It's also worth noting that Skadi's best impact with Tequila is her third skill, which is more niche than her second skill, and in most situations, you might find Skadi's third skill an overkill and her second skill is just too good to not use. Anyway, back to Tequila. You can take a look at this graph that I and Zephie made, and you can see from here that the numbers are still impressive even without these buffs. You can pause to read them, but long story short, his damage per hit is still very good against enemies below 1000 defense. But again, it still depends on the situation because when you're facing enemies with high defense, the buffers are way better, so keep that in mind. All in all, I do recommend building Tequila. Since he is a 5-star, this means he is cheaper to invest as well and would dare to say, almost equal to powers of 6-star operators. If you don't have Super Rush yet or waiting for Milnar and need more DPS, then consider Tequila to your roster as his materials are very worth the outcome. And with that concludes our appointment. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider give it a like so the algorithm can notice this channel once again, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos from me. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in our next appointment. This is Neko signing out. Have a nice day and best of luck at hunting, Doctor.
Maybe I'm a little too shy, always trying to be the wise guy. The thought of you under the moonlight is running all over my mind.